session, ladies and gentlemen, promises to be incredibly insightful and refreshing as we explore the use of artificial intelligence in pharmaceutical quality and operations. Our speaker for this session is an industry leader with extensive expertise in technical compliance and strategic consulting. So, everyone, do join me in welcoming the Vice President of Technical and Strategic Compliance Consulting at Parexel International, Mr. Mark Birse. A very warm welcome to you, Mark.
Hello, and good afternoon, everybody. I've spoken at IPA events on many occasions, and I think, as it was talked about earlier, it's really good to see the topic being around advances in manufacturing and quality, and actually looking at far more forward-thinking approaches than perhaps just let's just get quality right. So I think that's a really good topic, and it is probably a testament to the work that IPA does in India to take things forward. So I think that's very good. I always think, I spoke at different sessions at different times of the day. I always think the worst session to speak at is immediately after lunch. I want to go to sleep, you want to go to sleep. So let's see. But let's try and keep it interesting and see how we go. So a bit about me and my interest in that topic around AI in manufacturing and quality. So, and as I said earlier, so I was at MHRA for quite a long period of time, but towards the end of that time I was there, I looked after the digital health team for a while. And at that time we put out AI guidance around software as a medical device that went through a whole load of information on how to take that forward. And then it was quite interesting because across government in the UK, we had a number of meetings around how AI would take things forward. Now, that wasn't just medicines, that was across policing, it was across law courts, it was across education, so all of those sectors coming together. And probably one of the biggest stumbling blocks at that time was, how do you explain AI to people, and how do you get buy-in from the public? Because without public buy-in, it's very difficult to take things forward. A little bit more. So I did, when I was doing my MBA, I did my dissertation on the use, how do regulators need to adapt to the use of AI, virtual reality, and augmented reality within a production environment. And there's a little bit in here as well talking about that. And I'm a member of ISPE's Pharma 4.0 working group as well, and have been for quite a while. So, but whilst doing those things and seeing some things in industry, look, it's not my day-to-day work is GMP and has been for over the last 30 years. So this is a bit that we see and a bit that we do, but it's nowhere near my key space. And then that's my interest. I've got a little bit on when we go into some wider things. So in working for Parexel, we have a huge emphasis at the moment on AI and how that's transforming clinical trial delivery. And I've got a bit of a slide at the end to show as well how within that clinical space those types of things are being done. And then from the team that I'm in and our general interest, most of what we do, and I'm sure many of you are aware of what we do at Parexel, but as a group of mainly ex-regulators, it's around remediation, working on PAI preparedness, but we do have clients that come to us where they're implementing AI, and then we're supporting them into say, look, how is this sitting with regulations, and is what you're doing giving you an outcome that is going to be probably land well with the regulator. So that's the type of work we've been doing. So to go on to the agenda, I was going to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence in general and level setting. I've got some examples of where the types of things that can be done in quality and operations, a bit about regulation, a bit about wider AI and digitalisation, a small bit about how inspections could change and what you may see different from regulators in that space, and a bit of a conclusion and takeaway. What I'm not doing is telling you how to go away and write algorithms and how to use your data and actually do those aspects. It's more in that space to say, with the right data scientists in your organisation, the right understanding of your data, how can you use that and how can you get some benefits? So, look, AI generally for pharma our industry is driven by quality and regulatory standards. But every industry and every firm has a need to, how do you get better productivity and how do you get better cost reduction within what you're doing as well? Now, the adoption of AI, that has the potential to revolutionise across the entire life cycle, drug development, production, quality control, distribution, all of those aspects, bringing increased patient outcomes, but also bringing those medicines to market more efficiently. So how can you leverage artificial intelligence to bring better pharmaceutical quality, better production, and also increase those regulatory standards? So as a little bit of level setting, and we're just in the time we've got at a very top level. So within that AI space, you've got computer systems that are capable of performing tasks such as text recognition, decision making, problem solving, data analysis, often requiring human oversight, but that's where AI sits in the ability to do that from the data that is presented with. And then you've got different levels. So if you take artificial intelligence as a bubble, you start with machine learning that is around the systems are taking data, looking for patterns and making predictions. You then move on to deep learning, which has the next level of artificial neural networks. It's making linkages and it can make complex problems and, well, complex decisions and suggestions from the data that is presented with by making those linkages. You've then got computer vision systems where you're presenting not text or data to the system, you're presenting images, and the system looks for patterns in those images and then comes up with conclusions. And I've got lots of examples actually in working when I was at the agency with companies where unexpected consequences came out of those images that they really didn't think would drive the decisions they had. But if anyone talks to me over the break, I'll explain that then. You then have natural language processing, where it allows the systems to interpret text, do speech recognition, analysis, and make text summarizations. And then you move on to large language models, where we really are now, and that's trained on massive data sets, massive amounts of text, codes and data, but it looks then for patterns in human language and makes predictions. And they're the type of models that things like ChatGPT work on those large language models. You then have, in that generative AI space, you have other types of systems that may not be LLMs, they may be ones that are generating images or videos, but then they work from that kind of computer vision inputs that have been put into the system. So to give you some examples then of what can be within a pharmaceutical quality environment. So if we take, and I'm not going to go into huge detail on all of these, but looking at them. So if you take the first one around automated data analysis. So when you've got all of that data that you're generating within your system, how can you use that data to look at your quality control tests, environmental monitoring, batch records, all of those things to look for patterns or anomalies in the data. And then the AI can support you detecting quality issues, detecting deviations faster than traditional methods. It will also allow you to pull together a far wider data set than you would ever be able to look at well, unless you had unlimited manpower and unlimited time, it can rapidly come up and support your decisions and find links between things that you may never have expected before. Within that environment as well, looking at real-time monitoring, so how can your systems allow you to have continuous monitoring so that you get faster decision-making on any issues. If you start to get the parameters that you're monitoring start to move out of acceptable ranges, corrective actions that are made based on the data that's available and presented to that system. You've then got image and pattern recognition type systems you could have within the quality environment, so allowing you to analyse images, detect defects within the system. Now that could be within labelling and products, but I think particularly within anything that's a drug-device combination or got a complexity of that type of system, it can help you by taking images throughout every stage of the process to identify where there are potential problems in your system and correct those. Now, and a really good place where this can come from is from customer complaints. Now, you may have errors that you don't know about, but the data is there and showing that there's something. Now, you get a customer complaint, you may find it's a drug-device combination that's failed. Now, in identifying that particular device, if you've set your systems up well, you can look at the records at the time, identify perhaps what the exact issue was, then you can build all of that back into the system so that that problem can be eradicated in the future without... So you can have a fail once system, but you've got now systems that are able to use that pattern recognition and find where those problems may occur in the future in your production environments. Predictive analysis, so you've got the opportunity to forecast where there may be quality risks or prevent deviations and give more consistent product quality. Now, an example here could be that you have you have excipients or raw materials coming in. Now, they may pass your specification, but your specifications may be fairly wide on things like particle size, as an example. Now, you may find through analysis of using that historical data that you know that actually when you have a particle size at the lower end of that specification, you tend to get more quality defects, or you tend to get a lower yield. Now, using that data, you can know that actually the system can be set to say, looking at all of the inputs and parameters that you're taking forward with a product, and make actions that give you the best product you can get, or eliminate the deviations that you may be getting, because it's already using all of the historical data that suddenly that's just not data that's stuck on a server and doing nothing. This data is giving you power to actually get better processes going forward. Using it within root cause analysis. So you've had a problem identified and you're trying to find out what was the problem that contributed to that quality issue. Now, in having a model look across all the data you have, it can identify, are there either systemic problems that you've got that are reoccurring, is it one-off problems, and identify what the issues may be. Now, if you were to try manually to look across all of the quality, all of the testing parameters you've got, all of the equipment that's run and whether any issues with the equipment as it's run, all of the environmental monitoring data you've got, all of the HVAC as an example data and differentials in pressure, temperature, humidity through that batch, which operators were running the batch, which shift was running the batch, all of those, there could be a combination of things or just one thing that is causing that deviation. But in that root cause analysis, you can now process way more data than you were ever able to do before. Now, that's the type of power that having the right algorithms to look at this and look for anomalies in the data that could contribute to that outcome will help you take forward. Things around quality documentation and compliance. So you could use systems to help with accurate completion of documentation you have. It can help with that being batch records, CAPAs that you've got. But you could also develop systems that are giving you automatic checks back to regulatory standards to help you with any analysis and making the job of the quality professional in your organisation far easier to do and support going forward. And then there's another one here on deviation management. And it was just discussing before I came up as an example. So one client we were working with recently has got a new system where what they do is they investigate all their deviations if they're assigned as a critical or as a major deviation. Any minor deviation, and to be a minor deviation, it can't have a quality impact or it can't have a patient impact. But any minor deviation they have stopped investigating completely. They put all of those deviations into a data like bucket, and then once a month they run an algorithm on that data, and then from that, that's telling them where there may be things to look at. Now, some of what comes out of that system is complete garbage, but every now and again it does come up with trends for them to say, actually, what is worth doing is looking in this space or this space. Now, they could look at all of those minor deviations individually, and most of them would probably just be closed out without any follow-on. This is enabling them to get to a point where the time they have is spent on the most critical things, and then it's allowing them to focus in on what could be a potential problem that could be the next major or the next critical finding they have. So it's really driving that process forwards. Some examples then within within an operations type environment. So things around quality control and inspection. Now, using AI can help you, and there's lots of systems already, but getting better and better around analysing the images you've got, the data you've got from manufacturing steps, detecting defects and issues that you have, and then labelling those in-process tests, for example, to be far quicker. And visual inspection is a good example where by speeding up those processes quite dramatically, you're getting better operational effectiveness within your environment. It's going to increase your ability to put more batches through your facility by having much slicker processes. The next one's around predictive maintenance on equipment. Now, I'm sure most of you as companies have a maintenance cycle that's probably set up to what you do on a monthly, 3 monthly, 6 monthly, and 12 monthly basis on different parts of equipment and what you do. Now, having something that's far more actually predicting where you may be with those processes, taking the data from the machines themselves, analysing all the throughputs, the performance of those machines, it will enable you in real time to decide what needs maintenance and when. It will reduce the amount of downtime you have, and it will reduce the amount of breakdowns you have, increasing your production efficiency again, enabling you to be more effective as an operation and put more batches through your facility. Process optimization. So again, you analysing large volumes of data to see, and a lot of this comes back to really design space and some of that, the quality by design type principles. But how do you analyse all the data you have so that within your validated ranges, you know what are the best parameters to give you best yields, best efficiency, reduce waste, all of those aspects that will give you a better CPK for your products, but will drive down all of those inefficiencies that you have within the organisation. A little bit on predictive modelling. So again, AI can use historical data to look at things around your manufacturing processes, and it will enable companies to start to forecast which drug properties and formulations are going to give better stability and better shelf life going forward. So as an industry, we are rich with data. And I think that one of the presentations earlier talked about pharma lagging behind in this space and other industries really embracing and taking forward these things. And I think regulation's a big part of that, and we'll come on to that a bit in a moment. But more data is probably generated in this industry than many others. So there is actually, the potential is huge, I think, to take that and do something with it. Just on the last few examples of within the space that could be done. So around adaptive control, so how can you have systems designed where you're continually monitoring, making those adjustments, taking human error and human decisions out of the process, because you've got good control based on lots of historic data that enable you to really know what change when you make it or you start to move out of operational parameters. How do you come back in the right way and get better control on your processes? You could explore regulatory compliance. So how could you use AI to look at everything that you're manufacturing at a time to ensure accuracy, reduce errors, but also make sure that the efficiency of those processes there, but comparing that back to regulations that are in place and ensuring that they're being met in real time. Again, removing some of that burden later and review. There's aspects around supply chain optimization, so using algorithms there to optimize by forecasting demand, analysing your inventory, predicting potential bottlenecks, but bringing all of those aspects together so you have a far better lined up adjustment of material procurement, production and distribution processes. And using that as well with digital twinning, so that when you're going in to change something within your environment, you do that in a digital remote way on a platform, not straight into a facility, so you can actually optimize processes before they come in, so that you're already ending up with far better aligned supply chains that go end to end. And the final thing, and there's been examples published on drug discovery and formulation, but how can you use AI suggested lead molecular structures that you're going to take forward for development. Looking across scientific literature, structures that are there, pharmacological data, but there's already been examples of lots of drug discovery being driven by AI in that space. So I think that's another good thing to consider when taking forward. If we look a little bit about regulation of AI, so if you take the regulator perspectives, there are, in just around the last year, just slightly over last year, there's been guidance that's been published or discussion papers. So the FDA had a paper in May 23, EMA in July 23, and the MHRA have just had a more recent paper in April 2024. Now, if you look at those, the MHRA one, almost in its entirety, well, probably absolutely in its entirety, focuses on medical devices and software as a medical device. There is nothing really in there around pharmaceuticals and manufacturing and quality at all. The EMA paper has a little bit more, it's far more focused across the entire supply chain, but there's only really one paragraph that talks about manufacturing, and it's fairly limited. It talks about utilising ICH Q8, Q9, Q10 principles, and it talks about the Quality Innovation Group as well, which is a new group that EMA set up recently, very similar to how FDA and MHRA have had groups like that for a number of years to look at innovation interactions between industry and the regulator. But it there says that the QIG has a bit of a role within this as well. So again, it's very limited. The FDA's paper definitely has more. It talks about, again, it's pretty limited, what it says, and actually what it says is the aspirational type, you could do this, doesn't tell you how to do it, and it doesn't tell you how those types of aspects would be regulated. But what it talks about is advanced pharmaceutical manufacturing, it talks about process optimization, it talks about trending, process control. So it talks about the things that AI could do for you, but not how to do them. So, but I think they're worth a look. I think for the audience here, you're probably better focusing on the EMA and the FDA ones, I would think, from a pharmaceutical manufacturing point of view, but just to give you an oversight of what is there. Now, the big thing I think is, well, not that I just think, it is a problem with regulation, and we had an FDA said exactly the comment earlier that you're behind the curve. Regulators are behind the curve on lots of new things in innovation. So, and this is nothing new. So the quote that I've put there around a significant hurdle to the adoption of innovative technologies, basically doesn't keep pace with rapid developments in science, and actually that lack of coordination can either slow down implementation, or it may even stop people bringing implementation of something to the market. Now that quote comes from 2011, and when at MHRA, that was within a government policy on it was called Let's Get Down to Business, but how does regulation become smarter and more aligned with innovation? And that wasn't just for pharmaceutical, that was for across all sectors where there's a regulatory body. Further from that, the World Economic Forum, they have a group which is called the Centre for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is just absolutely focused on anything which is in that fourth industrial revolution, and AI clearly sitting firmly in there. They highlighted exactly the same issue around regulatory pacing and coordination, and bundled it up into a package they called around Agile Regulation. Now, I'm not going to go into all the aspects of Agile Regulation. They had 7 working principles, and I've spoke at conferences on it before, but if you look, they're quite good. But the 2 real distinct issues they came up with for regulation was around regulatory pacing and regulatory coordination. So the pacing bit, as we discussed, is that regulation generally sits behind and has to catch up with the emergence of new ideas, products, or business models, and coordination in that regulators often struggle to respond to those in a joined-up way, and how that cuts across maybe administrative, sectorial, or jurisdiction barriers. Now, some agencies are pretty good at talking across their own internal networks, and as I say, this is aimed at all regulated industries. I would say actually pharmaceuticals is a pretty good space for coordination, in where you have numbers of groups that work together across spaces, and AI and technology is a good one, where there's good linkages between FDA and EMA to discuss in that space, and there are lots of other global regulatory forums on harmonisation that work within the pharmaceutical space. But fundamentally, there is that pacing problem, absolutely. So when I did that bit of work I talked about earlier in looking at things, so I did a survey across a number of regulators and a number of people within industry, and the things from what regulators were doing, it was, and this was probably 4 years ago now, I think, there was little regulatory guidance existed. Now, it's probably still pretty much the same. We've seen those 3 papers I talked about earlier that have come up, but they don't really say anything about what to do. The guidance applicability, there was discussion amongst regulators, are the current GMP guidelines suitable for what's coming down the pipe with advanced technologies and AI and those things? Some regulators said absolutely, some said we're not so sure, and I think they're still in that space of, is the guidance enough, or how do you regulate absolutely in this space? There was a discussion that new approaches would be needed, and then on those discussions of what regulators could perhaps do more was around how can they enhance cooperation. We just talked a bit about how that's not a bad thing within this space. How do they build partnerships, so better industry, regulator working together? And I think the QMM pilot's a good example of that type of thing, where it goes forward and happens, but how can that happen within this advanced technology space? And probably is a little bit more of a challenge for lots of regulators to think about, is how could any of these types of systems give a level of regulatory relief? How can you have an approach where you have far better control, but you may have openness on your systems, and you allow regulators to see that, and do you get some regulatory relief for it? And I think if you're going to get more buy-in from people, often giving something back is what matters, I think, and actually drives better rates and better engagement from people. So a little bit, just not on AI, but a little bit wider on digitisation and some AI aspects within pharmaceuticals. So some things I've seen as I've gone round. So the first is augmented reality. So I've seen companies that are working on systems where, and let's say it's a simple process like line clearance. They would have an iPad that they can hold up. Through augmented reality, it will take them through step by step on the process, saying, you now check this point, tick, you now check this point. So it becomes an interactive batch record using augmented reality to overlay the points that you should be doing within the process. And I've seen that as well, and examples for engineering support, where You don't need the top engineer from the company coming down for your equipment when it's gone wrong with something like Google Glass or something that's giving you an augmented reality environment. Your engineers can fix complicated problems on equipment because they're on the phone or they've got a link back to the manufacturer to drive that forward. Virtual reality, there's lots of people using that in a training environment. The one that's probably most commonly seen is around clean room type technologies and putting the operator in a dummy space. But I've also seen companies where they partner with suppliers. One company where they had a whole load of new compression machines arriving. That manufacturer gave them a virtual reality overlay of the new equipment so they could train their operators in what the equipment does, what it looks like, how it feels, in a virtual reality space months before that equipment turned up on site. Cobots, robots, around automated tasks, particularly within laboratory environments and those that are maybe doing drug device combinations or drug delivery systems where there's a lot of automated testing. Having systems where you can remove the analyst doing each test or having to pull the trigger or fire the syringe, it gives consistency through the robot doing it, but you can also eliminate whole loads of health and safety type assessments on repetitive work for your operators doing that. A huge increase in the amount of digital batch records being seen, and I've seen systems where they're fully integrated across the entirety of the environment. So they not only capture the batch details, they will link to training records for the operators, they will link to equipment qualification or maintenance or other aspects, so calibration. So all of that, it can put blocks in. So you can say, look, these operators aren't trained to do this process, therefore the process has to stop, or have a quality intervention to make sure it's okay, not that you're investigating it at the end of the process. Up front, you know that's a potential problem. Aspects around blockchain to increase supply chain security. Knowledge management throughout the life cycle. Every time there's a handover from one process to another process, you lose knowledge and you often take a step backwards with the quality of your product. Now, using that data to support all the way through without loss is a key thing that I've seen in other examples. The connected facility, and that's really a bit back where we talked about digital records and how those things align. And the last example I've seen a lot of is around platforms with 360-degree cameras, a bit like Google Street View, but with the ability to map with a camera the entirety of your facility to support things like remote audits, but also when your clean rooms are down, mapping the entirety of your clean room with full interactive movable video in a doll's house type environment, so that when you are inspected and you've areas that the inspectors want to see but can't, you can show them in a virtual way how your facility is laid out. So we talked about clinical development. So this is what our big clinical teams are doing, and where we've got a whole team dedicated to AI. Now, across that whole continuum of clinical development, I'm not going to go into them, and you can look at these slides later, but every single one of those boxes that sits down the bottom here is being looked at to see how can AI drive forward that whole clinical process and clinical development to the benefits of clients and the benefit of patients to get medicines quicker, and the benefit of clients to have streamlined clinical processes. So getting towards the end, so the future of inspections. Will the current inspection approach continue, or will it need to adapt as you start to put more of these systems in? I think they'll have to adapt, and I'd be interested if people think they won't, but we can discuss that afterwards. But what levels of data access and oversight could be used? Are companies in a space where they'd be prepared to potentially give regulators access to the dashboards and data you have, if you had some regulatory relief? But as you've got more and more real-time data available to you, I can see that that's the type of thing where the future of inspections could lead to. Do you need a different skill set of the inspectors coming to see you? Do you need data-focused inspectors? And I think the other thing to consider is what are the AI systems that regulators could be using in the future on your data? Now, they could be analysing all the data you've given them as a site. They could be analysing that across the entire company to say, are all of your sites operating in the same way? Are there points that they should have their risk-based inspections targeted on? Or even going forward, perhaps a product, they could take your product, and let's say it's a generic and there's 6 other generic manufacturers, they could put all of the data in for that product and say, for that medicine, which could be a critical medicine potentially, but which is the manufacturer of greatest risk, or which is the manufacturer that's got potential problems that we need to drive and see and do more focus on. So I think that's worth considering as well. So really at the end as a conclusion, so the adoption of AI, it has the potential to improve patient outcomes, bring medicines to market more efficiently. It can revolutionise quality and operational processes. You've got the data, you need to use the data. And it can lead to increased efficiencies, better detection of quality issues, enhanced compliance with regulatory requirements. So it's for you to seize that opportunity and take it forward. New regulations are being developed and inspection strategies could change in the future. I mean, what's there now is pretty light from regulators, but it's going to have to build over time. And I think for me, a key thing is how do you use your quality and your process SMEs, but you're going to have new data SMEs, and those data SMEs have got to be integral, understanding across the process, working with your teams and taking everything forward. Thank you. So look, probably we're just about on time, so whether we've got time for questions or not, but if not, if you have any questions, please come and see me afterwards. You can send me an email, my details are there, connect to me on LinkedIn. And if you've got anything wider, GMP, compliance issues, inspection issues, again, reach out, and I'm sure me or somebody I work with at Parexel is more than happy to help you, so thank you. Oh, okay.
Hello. Yeah, thank you so much for a good presentation on AI implementation in pharmaceutical. I am Ravi Prakash from USB. I have 2 questions about AI. How AI will help for quality control test? Can you slightly elaborate? Because in QC, all manual, I think, process is there for dilution and all the things. How AI will help for this QC analysis?
So whether you'll remove the QC analysis, I don't think we're in that space now, but what it should be doing is enabling you to, the data that comes from that QC analysis, to be more efficient. There'll be times when I'm sure you're having to test for investigations and all of those types of things. Now, if you can have less investigations, less deviations, less incidents that require some level of extra analytical testing, it should reduce down the amount of extra work that comes to you. If you have better supply chain planning, you should have less incidents where, you know, the head of production is shouting at the head of quality, why is your process so slow? We've got to get these batches out. Why haven't you ordered those materials more timely? So it has the ability to perhaps not remove the testing, but for you to be able to operate in a more stable environment that's more controllable, I think.
Mark,
Yeah.
good afternoon, and thank
Hello.
you very much for very insightful presentation. Myself, Dr. Baldev Pandey from Lupin. My question is very simple. In perspective of the training and effectiveness check and qualification, what is your vision? How do you visualize VR-based training or augmented-based training could facilitate personal qualification and training effectiveness study? The data generated through these 2 innovative media could be used for personal qualification, for example, for aseptic qualification.
Yeah.
Please.
I always like it when people say it's a simple question, but and it never is. But I mean, I think those systems aren't there I can't see that system replacing, for example, aseptic qualification. But what it does is, take it like when you learn to drive, you don't just get in a car on your own day one and you're off. You do lots and lots and lots of lessons, and some of that's theory, some of it's just a short drive round the block. So think about how having operators practicing in an environment, correcting the bad practices before they get into the environment, it means that they're already much more knowledgeable and much more in that space. So I think it's not that one replaces the other. I think they dovetail together, and it's part of those type of systems become part of the continuum of training and driving forward quality standards. Okay, well, thank you.